most marathon runners should do most of their training. Why slowing down will help you go faster. This is such an important subject to gain a clear understanding and deep appreciation of, lest you have the inclination as a hard driving athlete to speed up a little bit in pursuit of getting fitter. It is an unassailable fact of exercise physiology that a robust aerobic system is a prerequisite for a robust anaerobic system. How can this be? What's the connection between sprinting or doing powerlifting or doing CrossFit or playing basketball or soccer versus jogging along and taking the time to go really slow and stay in those really comfortably paced aerobic heart rates below your fat max heart rate? Well, your aerobic energy producing enzymes and muscle fibers are actually intertwined with your fast twitch muscle fibers and glycolytic enzymes, glucose burning enzymes. So, your aerobic system supplies the fast twitch muscle fibers with the nutrients, blood, and oxygen they need to contract forcefully without oxygen. Of course, they're performing without oxygen to give you that explosive and short duration energy, but they need to be refueled, replenished, and that's where the aerobic system comes in. And also, the aerobic system facilitates the removal of waste products and restocking these explosive fast twitch fibers after they perform for short duration. And guess what? You cannot hack this with high intensity exercise because you don't have enough time to go out there and put in the hours necessary to build a robust aerobic base. When you just try to train in a stressful manner, emphasizing high intensity exercise and drifting above your fat max heart rate to do these medium to difficult duration cardiovascular sessions that are a little too hard, you're going to plunge into a pattern of breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury because your aerobic system is not well conditioned enough to handle high intensity exercise. You're going to produce more stress hormones. You're going to get into a sugar burning pattern where you have crash and burn energy cycles during the day, and you tend to drift toward increased or overconsumption of quick energy processed carbohydrates because you have exhausted yourself with overly stressful workouts. You're also going to inflict cellular damage and extracellular fatigue by relying on anaerobic energy metabolism requiring more recovery time. So you have to build the base so carefully with the vast majority of your cardiovascular exercise at or below or well below your fat max heart rate, which is 180 minus your age in beats per minute. And most people, when they find out how comfortable that is to be truly emphasizing fat burning, they're blown away and so frustrated because you have to slow way down from your typical medium to difficult pace where you feel that sense of getting a workout and getting a sense of exertion when you're climbing the stairs at the gym or riding the stationary bike or out there on the roads for a jog. So that's the big one. You need a strong aerobic system before you can dream of getting competency with high intensity exercise. Here's another reason from exercise physiology, unassailable. This is from textbook, okay? And it's research published by Dr. Paul Gaston in Australia. The relative contribution of the energy systems when comparing different durations of all-out exercise. So if you're going for 7 seconds or less, you're able to use pure ATP already stored in the cell for a true maximum explosive performance. That means even the sprinters in the Olympics that are going at 9.7 to win the 100 meters, it's not a completely all-out performance. They actually decelerate after around 60 meters or perhaps 6 or 7 seconds when the cell, the ATP becomes exhausted in the cell. So the only true 100% anaerobic performance is 7 seconds or less. That would mean a very short sprint, like doing the 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine, or doing a single rep in a powerlifting competition where you're seeing how much you can squat with a single rep. Anything over 7 seconds, you start to get into a mix of pure ATP, creatine phosphate system, as well as the lactate as a fuel source, as well as glucose as you go up in duration up to 30 seconds. You're using a lot of glucose, glycolytic. Okay, here's more research from exercise physiology. Do you know what the cutoff point, or do you know what the duration of a 50-50 effort is, where it's 50% contribution from aerobic system and 50% from anaerobic system? You might be shocked. A minute 15 all-out performance, which seems like a badass sprint. You're looking at the 400 meters in the Olympics are doing 45-second, 800 meters are doing a minute 43. So a minute 15 is 50-50. So even the 800 meters, 2 laps, where these guys are running at extremely high speed, the world record is a minute 40 for 800 meters. So it seems like a pure sprint, but it's more aerobic than anaerobic. A minute 15 is the cutoff for 50-50. When you're talking about a 6-minute all-out effort, so a time trial, for a lot of fit people, that might be a mile all out. It's 79% aerobic and 21% anaerobic. So when the endurance types think about doing a 5K for their speed work while they're training for the marathon, the 5K is predominantly aerobic, over 85% aerobic. If you're talking about an hour effort, an all-out effort of 1 hour, so that's an anaerobic threshold effort, that's 98% contribution from the aerobic system and only 2% from the anaerobic system. So even the fast stuff where you're doing intervals of 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes are predominantly aerobic. This means that even a sprint-oriented athlete, explosive-oriented athlete, soccer player, basketball player, football player, CrossFit athletes need to develop a strong aerobic base in order to get through those practices that last for an hour or 2 hours, which are predominantly aerobic. Even when one is getting out of the car and walking to the facility, or resting on a bench, sitting there doing nothing between sets of powerlifting, you are engaging and stimulating the aerobic system. Listen to my podcast with the prominent CrossFit coach and former Ironman triathlete Chris Hinshaw and his program that he calls Aerobic Capacity. 15 years ago or so, he noticed a huge void in the training methods of the elite CrossFit athletes, where they were very, very talented and powerful and capable of amazing explosive efforts, like doing 10 muscle ups on the rings, or doing handstand push-ups with a weighted vest and taking off and running a mile around the parking lot and coming back. They were extremely powerful, but they had a deficiency in aerobic capacity because they weren't including that aerobic base building exercise in their workouts, which were, designed around things like Olympic lifting and gymnastic and power and strength and precision type events in the gym. So he's had great success training over 50 CrossFit Games champions by building and improving their aerobic conditioning so that they may excel further when they're doing, for example, multiple sets of crazy stuff like muscle ups, pull ups, and so forth. Here's the another underappreciated aspect is that even very low level aerobic stimulation can build your aerobic capacity and improve your performance in high intensity efforts. There's so much obsession with staying below your fat max heart rate of 180 minus your age, and it's so frustrating because you go so slow. But even workouts that are way below fat max have a tremendous benefit to building that aerobic capacity without the interference of overly stressful workouts that require recovery. So there's no need to plug up to punch up right to your fat max every time you do an aerobic session. And in fact, when I had a huge aerobic capacity way back when I was a professional triathlete, I would perform a lot of workouts every week that were 15, 20, 30, or 40 beats below my fat max heart rate, which at the time was 155. Now, today, my fat max heart rate, I call it 125 or so. If I were 20, 30, or 40 beats below that, guess what I'd be doing? That's right. Walking, not even briskly, walking moderately would be a low level, quote unquote, easy aerobic workout for me today. And I'm going to gather or challenge that the same might be true for you, where you can embrace walking as a fundamental and critical aspect of your training for ambitious endurance goals and even high intensity goals, such as goals that I harbor running sprint events on the track. And so I think that's underappreciated, that we feel like we have to bump up right against a fat max in order to have a good session. Take the great marathoner, the GOAT of all time, Eliud Kipchoge. His training logs have been scrutinized by coaches, experts, exercise physiologists. He shares everything with the world. It's wonderful. And it's quite stunning to realize how much time he puts in at very easy paces to run the greatest marathon performances of all time. He broke 2 hours famously. So he's the 159 guy, if you haven't heard of him, the great Kenyan. And he's won the Olympics twice. I think he's won 13 out of the 16 marathons he's participated in. He is reported to train 82 to 84% of the time at what's described as an easy or light intensity, 9 to 10% of time at moderate, and 7 to 8, only 7 to 8% at high intensity. And even when we say high intensity, he rarely exceeds 80% of his capacity. That means the average marathon enthusiast, not to mention the competitive type, is literally pushing their body harder than the greatest marathon and perhaps the greatest endurance athlete the world has ever seen. If this ain't a call to slow down, I don't know what else is going to stick. So the vast majority of his running is at 4 to 5 minutes per kilometer pace. That's 626 to 803 pace per mile. 29 to 43% slower than his world record marathon pace. So if you have a marathon pace you can reference, for example, the average marathon time among 2 million finishers across the world, or excuse me, 1 million finishers every year across the world, was 4:30, which is a pace of 10:18 per mile. So most people are out there running the marathon at somewhere around 8, 9, 10, maybe 11 or 12 minutes per mile. If you went 43% slower than your marathon pace for an easy training session, we are now talking about 13 or 14 minutes a mile. Guess what the cutoff is between walking and breaking into a jog? It's around 14 minutes per mile. So most marathon runners should do most of their training, quote, the vast majority of their training at easy or light intensity, which means most of that running or that jogging should be walking. And more details on Kipchoge, it's 4 days of the week. 4 days of the week, he's performing at what he calls 50% capacity. So he's running at that 626 to 803 per mile. And this is what allows him to build and then throw down these super impressive workouts that you can read about, where they're doing 6 times 1,000 meter on a dirt track at high altitude in 3 minutes per kilometer, or crazy stuff that allows him to maintain that amazing 434 per mile pace for 26.2 miles. But if you think he's out there slamming like that every day, you're sorely mistaken. And I want to strongly encourage you, whatever your sporting goals are, whether they're high intensity related, and especially obviously if they're endurance related, to slow down and build that aerobic base properly by performing at 180 minus your age in beats per minute or below, or well below, for the vast majority of your training. Thank you for listening, watching.